The observation window of Lab 7 reflected Nick 7's face back at her like a mirror, showing someone else's life. She pressed one hand against the reinforced glass, studying her own features with clinical detachment. High cheekbones, silver-streaked dark hair, eyes that glowed faintly amber in dim light. Beautiful. They had made her beautiful. But beauty was just another weapon in the arsenal they had. Built into her DNA, Dr. James Rothwell watched her from his station across the room, pretending to study his tablet while actually observing the woman who stood motionless by the window. 3 months he had been assigned to Project Seraphim's bioethics division, and 3 months he had been disturbed by what he saw. NYX7 was classified as a synthetic hybrid, her genetic code woven from human DNA and spliced with adaptive proteins that made her stronger, faster, nearly indestructible. The perfect corporate asset, the perfect prisoner. Your cortisol levels are elevated, James said quietly, breaking the silence. Are you experiencing stress? Nick 7 turned from the window, her movements fluid and precise. I do not experience stress, Dr. Rothwell. I experience biological responses to stimuli. There is a difference. Is there? He set down his tablet and leaned back in his chair. What stimulus is causing the response? She tilted her head, a gesture that might have seemed curious in anyone else, but appeared calculated in her. I was observing the stars beyond the facility perimeter. It triggers a physiological reaction I cannot categorize. My creators called it a glitch. James felt something tighten in his chest. They had engineered her to be emotionless, stripped away the genetic markers for deep feeling. And yet here, she stood, drawn to starlight like a moth to flame, experiencing something she had no words for because they had stolen her ability to name it. Maybe it's not a glitch, he said softly. Maybe it's wonder. Wonder is inefficient. Her response came automatically, rehearsed. But her eyes lingered on his face a moment too long, searching for something she could not identify. Over the following weeks, James found excuses to extend his evaluation sessions. Director Cross wanted a full psychological profile. After all, he needed to be thorough. At least that's what he told himself as he spent hours talking with NYX7, asking her questions that had nothing to do with his official assessment. Tell me about your earliest memory, he asked one evening. The lab dimmed to simulate night cycle. Nix-7 sat across from him, her posture perfect even in repose. I was 7 days old. Awareness came suddenly, completely. I knew my purpose, my capabilities, my limitations. I knew I was made to serve. Nothing before that? No fragments, no impressions? She was quiet for a long moment, her amber eyes distant. There was warmth. Before awareness, there was warmth. And a sound rhythmic like. She paused, struggling. I lacked the reference. A heartbeat, James said gently. You were describing a heartbeat. Something shifted in her expression, so subtle that anyone else might have missed it. But James had spent countless hours learning to read the micro-expressions that flickered across her face. The humanity that leaked through, despite all their engineering. That is impossible, she whispered. I was grown in a gestation pod. There was no heartbeat. Maybe you're remembering the donor, James suggested. The human whose DNA they used as your template. Maybe some part of her is still in you. NYX7 stood abruptly, her hands clenching and unclenching. I am not human, Dr. Rothwell. I am a synthetic construct. I have no mother, no family, no capacity for the bonds that define your species. I was made in a lab. I cannot love. The words hung between them like broken glass. James rose slowly, carefully, as though approaching something wild and wounded. NYX, that is not my name. I am NYX7, Unit 7 of Project Seraphim, asset number. You're more than a number. He took a step closer. I've seen you pause when you hear music in the facility corridors. I've watched you gentle your touch when handling the lab plants because you're afraid to break them. I've documented dozens of responses that your creators would call glitches, but I call them proof. Proof of what? Her voice cracked, the first genuine emotion he had heard from her. Proof that you feel. Proof that they failed to erase your humanity, no matter how hard they tried. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time since they met, she let her carefully constructed walls fracture. I do not know how to do this. I was not made for this. James closed the distance between them, his hand hovering near hers, but not touching, offering connection without demanding it. None of us know how, Nix. We just try. We just feel, and we hope it's enough. Her hand moved, trembling slightly, and her fingers intertwined with his. The touch was electric, terrifying, real. This is dangerous, she whispered. If they discover, I know. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, marveling at the warmth of her skin, the proof of life in every cell. I know. In the observation lab, with starlight streaming through the windows and their hands joined across the space that separated them, something impossible began to bloom. Neither of them spoke of love. She had been taught she was incapable of it, and he knew better than to name the thing growing between them. But in the silence, in the touch, in the way her amber eyes finally held something more than emptiness, the truth wrote itself across both their hearts. The alarm in Lab 7 screamed to life at 0300 hours, bathing everything in pulsing red light. James jerked awake at his workstation, his tablet clattering to the floor. Across the room, Nix 7 stood frozen, her enhanced hearing having detected the security breach before the klaxon sounded. They know, she said, her voice cutting through the noise with unnatural clarity. Director Cross accessed my biometric data. She has seen the changes. James's blood turned to ice. For the past month, he had been falsifying reports, hiding the subtle shifts in Nix 7's hormone levels, the increased activity in the parts of her brain that governed emotion. He had told himself he was protecting research integrity, but he knew the truth. He was protecting her. What changes? He demanded, already moving toward the console to check the system logs. Nix 7 turned to face him, and in the red emergency lighting, her expression held something he had never seen before. Fear. My neural pathways are rewiring themselves. The emotional suppressors they built into my DNA are failing. I am becoming what they designed me not to be. The lab doors hissed open. Director Vivian Cross strode in, flanked by 4 security officers in tactical gear. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s. Her gray hair pulled back severely, her eyes cold as a winter sky. Dr. Rothwell. Step away from the asset, Cross commanded, her voice clipped and precise. She's not an asset, James said, moving to place himself between Nix 7 and the guards. She's a person. Cross's laugh was brittle. She is property of Helix Corporation, intellectual property that you have compromised with your incompetent evaluation methods. And YX7 is exhibiting emotional instability, attachment behaviors, and worst of all, independent thought. She is a failed experiment. Behind him, James felt Nix 7's hand brush against his back, a touch so light it might have been accidental. But he knew better. She was asking for trust, for hope, for something to hold on to in the face of her creator's judgment. The project parameters were flawed from the start, James argued, his scientist mind racing for logic that might save her. You cannot strip away humanity at the genetic level and expect a stable result. And YX7 isn't failing. She's evolving. She's contaminated, Cross snapped. And you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. And YX7 will be decommissioned and her genetic material harvested for the next iteration. The word decommissioned hit James like a physical blow. They were going to kill her, dissect her like a failed prototype, and start again. "Run," he whispered to Nick 7. "When I move, you run." "I cannot leave you," she whispered back, and the raw emotion in her voice nearly broke him. "You have to trust me." James grabbed his tablet and hurled it at the nearest guard, then dove for the emergency lockdown panel. His fingers flew across the controls, triggering a facility-wide containment protocol. Steel barriers began slamming down across doorways, separating Cross and 3 guards from the lab interior. "Go!" James shouted. Nick 7's enhanced reflexes kicked in. She moved like liquid shadow, her genetically modified muscles propelling her toward the emergency maintenance shaft. James sprinted after her, his heart hammering against his ribs. Behind them, Cross's furious commands echoed through the facility intercom. "Seal all exits. I want that asset recovered, and Dr. Rothwell detained for corporate espionage." The maintenance shaft was cramped and dark, designed for repair drones rather than people. Nick 7 navigated it with preternatural grace, while James struggled to keep pace, his knees scraping against metal, his lungs burning. "Where are we going?" Nick 7 asked, pausing at an intersection of tunnels. "Sublevel 9, the old research wing they shut down last year. There's an external access port we can use to reach the transport depot." They emerged into a corridor thick with dust and neglect. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across abandoned equipment and sealed laboratory doors. James led them to a service elevator that still had power, his security credentials miraculously still active. As the elevator descended, Nick 7 turned to him in the flickering light. "Why are you doing this? You are sacrificing everything for someone who should not even exist." James met her amber gaze steadily. "You exist. That's all that matters. And what they want to do to you, that's murder dressed up in corporate language. I won't let it happen. I am afraid," she confessed, the words seeming to surprise even her. "This emotion, it is overwhelming. How do humans bear it?" He reached for her hand, no longer hesitating, no longer pretending their connection was purely professional. "We bear it together. Fear, joy, pain, all of it. We share it with people who matter to us. Do I matter to you, James?" The use of his first name, spoken with such vulnerability, undid him completely. "Yes, God help me, yes." The elevator shuddered to a stop. They exited into the sublevel maintenance area, pipes hissing overhead, the air thick with humidity. James located the external access port and began overriding the locks. "When we get out there, we have to disappear completely," he said, working frantically. "No digital footprint, no contact with anyone from our old lives. There are underground communities, places where people like you can live without corporate ownership. I have contacts who can help." "People like me," Nick 7 repeated softly. "You mean the escaped, the discarded, the ones deemed too broken or too human for their purpose?" "I mean people who deserve freedom." The lock disengaged with a heavy clunk. James pulled the access door open, revealing the transit depot beyond. Rain fell in sheets outside the facility perimeter, the city lights blurring into watercolor streaks. Nick 7 stepped through first, then turned back to look at him. Rain plastered her dark hair to her skull, droplets running down her face like tears she had never been taught to cry. "I do not know what happens next. I was not programmed for this." James joined her in the rain, pulling the door shut behind him. "Neither was I. We figure it out as we go." She reached for him then, her strong arms pulling him close, her enhanced body shielding him from the worst of the downpour. He felt her heart beating against his chest, faster than human normal, but steady and real and alive. "I think," she said slowly, carefully, "that what I feel for you is love. I have no other word for it." James cupped her face in his hands, rainwater running between his fingers. Then that's what it is. When he kissed her, it was not the careful, clinical touch of a scientist studying a subject. It was desperate and real and fully human. She kissed him back, learning the language of affection in real time, her programmed restraint falling away to reveal the woman beneath. Somewhere in the facility behind them, alarms continued to wail. Director Cross would mobilize every resource to find them. But in that moment, standing in the rain with his arms around someone who had been told she could never feel, James Rothwell decided that some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth losing everything to protect. They ran into the night, together, leaving behind the sterile labs and cold efficiency of Helix Corporation. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and a world that might not accept what Nix 7 was, but they would face it together. The safe house was a converted warehouse in the Undercity, 3 levels below the gleaming corporate towers where James had spent his career. Nix 7, who now insisted on being called Nova, stood at the grimy window, watching rain streak down the reinforced glass. 6 months had passed since their escape, 6 months of hiding, moving, trusting strangers who existed in the margins of society. "You should rest," James said, emerging from the makeshift kitchen with 2 cups of synthetic coffee. The real stuff was too expensive for their new life. Nova turned from the window, and James's breath caught as it always did when he looked at her. She had cut her hair short, dyed it black to avoid recognition, but her amber eyes still glowed in the dim light. More than that, those eyes held warmth now, held feeling, held everything Helix Corporation had tried to engineer away. "I cannot rest," she said, accepting the coffee but not drinking it. "Something is wrong with me." James set his cup down immediately, switching into the doctor mode that still defined part of who he was. "What kind of wrong? Pain? Malfunction in your enhanced systems?" "I have been experiencing nausea for the past week, fatigue, heightened sensitivity to smells." She paused, her brow furrowing. "And my body temperature has increased by 0.7 degrees. A cold weight settled in James's stomach. Those symptoms, in a human woman, would mean something very specific. But Nova had been engineered to be sterile. The genetic modifications that made her stronger, faster, and more resilient had also made reproduction impossible. At least, that's what her designers had intended. "We need to see Dr. Patel," James said. Already reaching for his coat. Dr. Rashmi Patel ran an underground clinic for the undocumented, the modified, and the escaped. She had helped them twice before when Nova's enhanced immune system had rejected standard medications. Her office was hidden behind a noodle shop, accessed through a kitchen freezer that led to a surprisingly well-equipped medical facility. "Tell me everything," Dr. Patel said, her dark eyes sharp as she guided Nova onto an examination table. She was a small woman in her 60s, her gray hair tied back in a practical bun, her hands steady with decades of experience. Nova recited her symptoms with clinical precision while Dr. Patel ran scans, drew blood, and muttered to herself in a mixture of English and Hindi. James paced the small room, his mind racing through possibilities, each more improbable than the last dot after an hour. Dr. Patel stepped back from her equipment, her face unreadable. "I need you both to sit down." "Just tell us," Nova said, her enhanced hearing having already picked up the accelerated rhythm of the doctor's heartbeat. "The uncertainty is worse than knowledge." Dr. Patel pulled up an image on her scanner, a grainy ultrasound that showed the interior of Nova's abdomen. There, nestled against her modified organs, was an unmistakable shape. Small, primitive, but undeniably alive. "That's impossible," James whispered. "Apparently not," Dr. Patel said dryly. Sorry, Nova. You are approximately 8 weeks pregnant." The room seemed to tilt. Nova stared at the screen, her hand moving unconsciously to her stomach. I was designed to be sterile. My reproductive system was genetically suppressed. Life finds a way, Dr. Patel said softly. I've seen it before in modified organisms. You suppress one pathway, and evolution opens another. Your body has been rewiring itself since you started experiencing emotions. This is part of that rewiring. James moved to Nova's side, his hand covering hers. Are you okay? What are you feeling? I do not know, Nova said honestly, her voice trembling. I was told I could never create life. I was told I was too synthetic, too artificial. And now there is a life inside me, made from impossible things. Tears streaked down her face, the first tears James had ever seen her cry. He pulled her close, his own eyes burning. Is it safe? He asked Dr. Patel, can her body handle this? The doctor's expression turned serious. I don't know. I've never treated a pregnant bioengineered hybrid before. Her enhanced systems might protect the pregnancy, or they might reject it as a foreign body. We're in uncharted territory. A noise from the outer clinic made all three of them freeze. Voices, harsh and commanding. Security forces. They found us, Nova said, her enhanced hearing parsing the conversation beyond the walls. Director Cross is with them. She is offering a bounty for my recovery. Dr. Patel moved quickly, gathering medical supplies into a bag. There's a back exit through the underground transit tunnels. Go now. Come with us, James urged. Someone needs to slow them down. Dr. Patel pressed the bag into his hands. Prenatal vitamins, supplements that might help her unique biology. Take care of each other. They fled through the tunnels, Nova's enhanced abilities guiding them through the darkness. Behind them, James heard shouting, the sound of the clinic being torn apart. They emerged 3 blocks away, in an alley slick with rain. We cannot keep running, Nova said, breathing hard despite her enhanced endurance. Not with a child to protect. Not anymore. James thought of the bounty, of Director Cross's relentless pursuit, of a corporate system that saw Nova as property to be recovered. Then he thought of the life growing inside her, the impossible miracle that proved her creators wrong about everything. New Providence, he said suddenly. A colony on Titan's 4th moon. They have laws protecting bioengineered beings, declaring them legally autonomous. Cross can't touch you there. That is 2 months' travel, Nova protested. We do not have resources for passage. I know someone who owes me a favor. A big one. James pulled out a battered cum device, one of the few connections to his old life he had kept. Captain Helena Voss. We went to university together. She runs a freight hauler, and she's never liked corporate overreach. The call connected after 3 rings. A woman's face appeared, weathered and skeptical. James Rothwell. I heard you went rogue. I need passage to New Providence. 2 passengers. No questions asked. Helena's eyes narrowed. That's a big ask. What's in it for me? The data chip in my jacket pocket contains every unethical experiment Helix Corporation conducted in Project Seraphim. Genetic slavery, unauthorized human trials, the works. You leak that, you'll be a hero to every modified being in the system. Helena was quiet for a long moment. Dock 17, Bay 3. You have 1 hour before I launch. Don't be late. They made it with minutes to spare, boarding Helena's ship as security forces descended on the transit station. As the vessel broke atmosphere, James stood with Nova in the observation deck, watching Earth shrink behind them. I am afraid, Nova admitted, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. Afraid of what I am becoming. Afraid of what we have created. James pulled her close, his hand covering hers. You're becoming a mother. We're becoming parents. And yes, it's terrifying. But you were told you couldn't feel, and you learned to love. You were told you couldn't be free, and you escaped. You were told you couldn't create life, and here we are." She leaned into him, her enhanced strength gentled by choice. "What kind of world are we bringing this child into?" "An uncertain one," James admitted, "but one where they'll be free. Where you'll both be free." 2 months later, on New Providence, they stood before a colonial magistrate who legally recognized Nova as an autonomous being with full rights. Director Cross's bounty meant nothing in this jurisdiction. Helix Corporation's reach ended at the boundary of colony space. As they left the courthouse, Nova's hand found James's. Her body had begun to show the pregnancy now, her modified physiology adapting in ways that fascinated and terrified them both. "I was made in a lab," she said, echoing the words she had spoken so long ago. "I was told I could not love. I was told I could not create. I was told I was not truly alive. And now?" James asked. She placed his hand on her stomach, where the impossible life they had made together grew stronger each day. "Now I know they were wrong about everything." In the distance, the twin suns of New Providence painted the sky in shades of gold and amber. Ahead lay challenges they could not predict, a future they would have to invent as they went. But they would face it together. A synthetic woman and a human man, and the child who proved that life, in all its forms, cannot be contained by the limitations others try to impose. Some bonds are stronger than genetic code. Some love defies the careful plans of those who would play God. And sometimes the impossible becomes real simply because two people dared to believe it could.